fundamentally, I'm a finance guy. I have an MBA in finance, and I was finance director of the wastewater utility here for over a dozen years. But I kept doing energy stuff for the council, and I'll show you some of that. It's been pretty successful, and so they keep wanting me to do more. The director of council sustainability means transit as well, and some of the other divisions. So I thought I would do this, but I'm happy to be redirected at any point. If you want to have questions, just stop me, and we'll get as far as we get until we get kicked out of here. So just quickly talking about who the council is and our solar projects, other renewable energy, right? Because we're not just solar. And collaboration, helping others. I've had quite a day. I might tell you about that with collaborations with others. Some renewable energy resources that we know of used, some of we've produced for local governments. And then if there's more time for more questions at the end, I'm certainly willing to give that a shot. So if you don't know about the Metropolitan Council, fundamentally, despite the politics around our governance, fundamentally the Metropolitan Council provides efficient metro scale services. It would cost you a lot more for wastewater, and it used to, and their environmental performance was a lot worse. But also, I don't know how you'd really do metro transit. All the buses, the light rail, which is electric, metro mobility, the little buses that we run. We're federally designated Metropolitan Transportation Planning Agency, so there's federal money that goes into regional solicitation, and that includes walking and biking and all sorts of transportation opportunities. So I work mostly for MCES, the Environmental Services Division, and I have one slide on that as well. The original council, actually, prior to 1994, did local government planning so that cities don't fight with each other and so that we do efficient metropolitan scale services. And we pass through state money for regional parks. If you see regional on a park, that means it's one of ours that we've been funding. And we also do housing. We have a HRA. Really, it fills in the gaps where the cities don't have that function. So, the big cities do their own, but some of them don't. And so the council's doing all of that. And we're trying to help with sustainability with all of that. So again, the Environmental Services Division of the Metropolitan Council fundamentally and historically is the wastewater utility. We have 8 plants. We have 109 directly connected cities and townships. And sometimes people say, well, I live out in the rural area, so you don't serve me. That's not true. I'm actually on septic. I just had my septic pumped yesterday, and then that comes down to the Metropolitan Wastewater Plant. We treat that too. In fact, we take loads from all over the state, from ethanol plants, landfill leachate. So we're really receiving a lot of wastewater. We have quite a large capacity. This picture here, I just showed you the Metropolitan plant. By the way, there are tours if you're really interested at some point. Looks like a college campus. It's a huge plant. It's probably $2 billion infrastructure by itself. And we treat about 250 million gallons a day average flow. Here's the cleaned up water coming out of the Metropolitan plant. It looks like a river on its own. So about 75% of the metro area goes through that Metropolitan plant. We own 600 plus miles of the big pipes that go between cities. We call them interceptors. And then the cities own thousands of miles of their own city trunks and laterals and so forth. Lift stations, because mostly sewage flows by gravity, but once in a while you have to pick it up, so they keep doing that. Lots of metering. We also have some other water responsibilities. We don't operate water supply, but we do a metropolitan water supply plan. We work with cities and regional subgroups to try and make that as efficient as we can. We also do a lot of water quality monitoring. If you're interested in the quality of your streams, rivers, and lakes, there is just reams of data that's available on the council website for that. Some of it relates to our permits on these wastewater treatment plants, but some of it's just because we care about water quality. And we work real hard with industries. We have about 800 on permit to help them actually reduce what they pay us and the costs of treating their wastewater. We have a nation-leading program right now to actually finance for them pre-treatment of the wastewater, so we don't have to build more expensive plants, or hopefully, or at least a few years later after I retire. So just one more thing about wastewater. This is such an old picture, it's not in color. That is sewage mats on the Mississippi. The river was really a bad thing. They did a survey in the 30s, I think, 40 miles down to Red Wing with this great big huge net. They found 3 fish. Not 3 species, 3 fish. Usually people ask me, well, did you put them back? I say, no, they're better off dead. It was really a place where no one that had any money would live or hang out. It was just not. And now, you know, this is actually a picture of the effluent coming out of the Metro plant. I don't know what this shows, but it's quite a bit darker than the river. We're actually better quality by most parameters than the river after that treatment that you just saw. And as a result, living by the river is an amenity. If you've seen downtown St. Paul lately, there's all sorts of new stuff along the river there. So our vision actually is not just to be a wastewater treatment division, but to be a valued leader in water sustainability. And for us, that means the air quality that we impact to, the solid waste. We try to do resource recovery as much as we can. All of that's water. Sustainability, the operations, even though our core business is sustainability. So energy, of course, is one of the issues where we can make a big difference. We are one of Excel's largest customers. We used to be one of the top 3. And now with our conservation program, we're down to the top 10. That's really a good thing. However, we're still paying them like $15 million a year for energy. This is just the Environmental Services Division. The Council's light rail pays several $1 million as well, and their transit garages and so forth. So we've had a number of goals, and this is what I was talking about, my personal. I led the team, actually. I didn't really do any of this stuff, but I led a team that accomplished the 15% reduction in our operating energy by 2015 or 2010. And then my boss said, well, what are you going to do now? So, you know, we worked behind the scenes, and we had a plan to get to 25%. We thought, and he said, you probably already know how to do that. I want you to shoot for 50. We never did figure out exactly how to do that. In fact, we actually fell a little short of the 25%. It was like 22.5 by the end of 2015. But that is $4 million a year of savings for the metropolitan area wastewater ratepayers. And now we've got 2 new goals. Based on that 2015, we're trying to, and this will repeat every 5 years, at least that's the current plan, try to get another 10% reduction. There's still more we can do, not low-hanging fruit, but, and then also we want to advance renewable energy. And we don't really count that as reducing our purchase because we don't have the RECs, the renewable energy credits. I can talk a little bit more about that if you want, but we still think we're doing a good thing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the reasons why governments should pursue solar. And some of you, I apologize, John, you've probably heard this from me because I've done this many times. Because sometimes, you know, we have other things that we do. Transit's about ridership, moving people around, getting them to jobs and stuff like that. Wastewater is about clean water. There are other core things. Why should we do energy, particularly conservation, but solar and renewable energy? So this is my attempt to be funny, but also lay this out. Avoiding greenhouse gases. There's actually a state law from 2008 that calls for the state to reduce 80% emissions by 2050, and there's interim goals. We're going to miss them all, you know, and we don't want to be part of that. We want to exceed ours. Climate change is real. If you don't know, I mean, there's all sorts of statistics now. We've had 3,000-year floods since 2004, dozens more of intense weather events. We had Mark Seeley come talk to the council recently. He's very impressive. That video is online if you want to hear them. 7 of Minnesota's 10 warmest years occurred in the last 15 years. The trout and the walleye are threatened. You know, I mean, there's all sorts of things. We're talking about 2 to 6 degrees Fahrenheit increase by 2050, 5 to 10 degrees by 2100. So those are statewide numbers. And it's worse in the urban area. This week, I spent a couple days at the Urban Climate Institute, at the Science Museum. I mean, there are areas where you have several degrees worse in the Twin Cities. Even within Minneapolis, differences within a few miles of 10 degrees or 20 heat degree days have been recorded by the university researchers. And that actually threatens life, you know, never mind everything else. So That's an issue too. So we want to also avoid other air emissions. People that are scientists will know of criteria pollutants. So this is particulate matter, 2.5 microns or less, sometimes called soot, and ground level ozone. We are occasionally right on the threshold of being considered by the EPA a non-attainment area. We are not now, and that's a competitive advantage for the metropolitan economy. A lot of metro areas are. And I thought, oh my God, that'd be terrible. People have estimated $200 million a year cost of compliance if we slip into non-attainment. And then the Department of Health said, but you realize whether or not it's $1 billion of cost to human health. Because, people get asthma and bronchitis and die and stuff. I don't know how they estimate that. But so regardless of the rules, it's a good idea to reduce those. Air quality alerts have to do with this kind of stuff that you might see once in a while. And of course, solar avoids that. We're a water agency, right? So we don't really want to see water is warmed. There is quite a nexus between energy and water issues along a lot of fronts. Energy facilities use a lot of water, and water facilities use a lot of energy. Well, they use it for cooling water from nuclear and fossil fuel, but not solar. So that's kind of a nice advantage as well. So reason number 7, avoid using resources future generations. We might need our oil for plastics or cement or something else. It would be good if we could keep that for future generations. Reason number 6, Minnesota pays $18 billion for fuels every year because we don't have any coal and gas and oil. And boy, if we can reduce that some, we can keep that money, we can make local jobs. Those people with local jobs then spend their money again. Economists call that a multiplier effect. So there's a lot of reasons why that would be great if we can keep some of that. In fact, I heard today that some group is saying there's like 50,000 jobs that are involved in clean energy right now in Minnesota. 50,000. That the state study a couple years ago said 15. They did different criteria. The 50,000 by the energy industry group, and anybody that was involved at all. Basically, they counted as 54 or something. I actually have a sheet on that if you'd like to see it later. So I think I went through that. So number 4, distributed energy. A lot of you know about community solar gardens or have solar on your own house or so forth. Well, this is a good thing. It's not a security risk. If it's all over the place, one can go down. It doesn't matter. We're all grid connected. So it's just a safer, more reliable system. Diversity is strength, actually. Supporting, I mentioned already the state goal on emissions, but they also have goals on renewable energy and a solar mandate, which we're going to blow by, I think, actually. But the renewable standard is 30% by, somebody knows this, is it 2025? And there's a lot of conversation going on about moving that to 40 or 50%. So we were originally in kind of a leadership position on some of this stuff, including net metering, but not so much anymore. There's a lot of states that have blown by us in terms of their goals. And of course, for those of us with large operations like the wastewater utility, it's good to get a significant chunk of our revenue that's fixed, that we at least know what it is. Some of it has escalators, but there's a lot of uncertainty when buying the energy from Xcel or the other utilities. And hold your breath. Last but not least, we can actually make money on solar. And the projects that I'm going to tell you about in a minute, we are on every one of them. We're making money on a net present value basis, which is how our finance people like to look at numbers, which means the ratepayers are better off. So sometimes people say, well, why would the ratepayers have to fix this climate problem? That's, that should be general tax money or something like that. Well, they're not. We're making money. It's a good thing. So that's my spiel about 10 reasons why government should do solar. Most government people actually buy that, but a lot of littler governments, they don't have energy people, they don't have time to do it. There's a lot of tools and things that are available now. I'm going to talk a little bit about our projects. There's some suns there. The big sun, 5 transit sites in Minneapolis are smaller things. We have a 100 kW transit that's in operation, and the Blue Lake plant, which I think it's the next picture. I'll show you that. So some of the Metro Transit facilities that are up and up and running here. Let's see, this is a park and ride at 610 and Noble on the right. They also have the rail support facility. Each of those are 40 kW. There's many, many bus shelters now. You can see on the left with the little solar. We're trying to do that kind of stuff. Perhaps more exciting for me, at least, because I'm with the wastewater utility. This is the Blue Lake plant. Serves all the western suburbs, 30-some communities. It's in Shakopee, right on your way to Valley Fair, right before you get there. And there's about 6 acres, 4,000 panels. This is up and producing power today. It was about a 6 or 7 year effort. We went through many different financing plans that didn't work out, but we finally got one that did. This is what we call behind-the-meter solar, and the transits are too. And behind-the-meter to us means this is not a community solar garden. We are getting all of this power. It's connected right to our own grid. There's more technical issues for us, but we get to keep all the power, reduces what we buy. Question? Was that a question? Or?
Oh, no.
No? Okay.
Do you ever, these are sized completely behind the meter, never a net producer, you know?
So interestingly, this Blue Lake plant, this is 1.25 megawatts AC, so it's 1.57 DC or something like that. We sized that originally before the net metering increased to 1 megawatt. And so we sized it so that we would always need all this power. Because if you put power back on the grid, you get eaten alive by the numbers. They don't pay you much for that. So that's how that size was determined. As we were finalizing this, the net metering law increased to 1 megawatt, and we did split it into 2 projects. And because we actually have 2 accounts there at the plant. So one of them's just under 1 megawatt, and one of them's just over 250. So they're both net metered. So we made that work. So that, well, one of the reasons why is, frankly, the electrical system and wastewater plants are often complex grids of their own. And this one has 2 sides to it with 2 different feeders. It actually takes an electrician to get one to feed the other. So we could be overproducing on one side of that. Now we don't have to worry about it or do anything. We'll let it go to the grid. We still get the same amount of money. So that's probably more than you wanted to know. Was there any other questions? Otherwise, I'll just keep babbling on. Keep going. Okay. So you probably know about community solar gardens, right? Is there anybody who would like me to sort of generally describe that? Everybody knows about community solar gardens. Things the governments might do on these. We host some. Where's Bob? Bob was here talking to me earlier. There he is. Edina is hosting one on top of their city hall, was it?
The Public Works.
On top of the Public Works. So local governments can host sites for community solar garden or behind the meter. You know, we're doing that as well. We certainly are being subscriber in a lot of them. And in our case, we've done a lot of coordinating the procurement process. And I'll talk some about joint collaborative procurement that we did. Well, one of the perspectives that you might not have about community solar garden, why is that sometimes actually advantageous to us over behind the meter? Well, there's no loss of interruptible credit. So we have tariffs, right? The way we buy power from Excel, we enter into a peak control agreements where we drop our load when they have their systems challenged and we get cheaper rates all year long. Well, they won't let you do that but for firm power. So this is a better deal because that interruptible credit's worth some real money to us. No real, well, there's a 1 megawatt limit now on this, but you don't have to match the size of your load to the size of the facility because it's not really going to your facility, it's going to the grid. So that's kind of a nice thing. No facility interconnection issues. Oh, we had some issues with behind the meter about who owns exactly that point of connection. You know, that point of common coupling, I think is what the engineers called it. And who's going to do the maintenance on that? I mean, there was a lot of issues about voltage and phasing, things that I don't really know about, that they worked out. But we don't have to deal with any of that on a community solar garden. The vendor and it has to deal with Excel, and they have to get an interconnection permit, but we don't have to. So that's a reason why governments would like it. I also want to say that there's a big financial difference. At the Metro plant, the big one I showed you, we have really pretty cheap power. It's transmission transformed because we have our own substation, so we get pretty cheap power there. But I can still subscribe that to community solar gardens because the credit I get is dollars. It's not kilowatt hours offsetting our purchase. It's dollars. So it doesn't matter that I have cheap power. So that's kind of an advantage too. That's just sort of government perspective what's cool about community solar gardens. And we don't have to have a whole bunch of staff maintain them because that's not really our business. I have smart engineers, but they're wastewater engineers. You know, and we have some electrical expertise, but you know, it's great if somebody else can do it. John.
Since you brought up that issue, then point number 3 actually is an error.
It's just credit with electricity credit. Yeah, it's the dollar amount. You're right.
It's not consistent with what you just said.
Yes, I didn't make this slide.
Likewise, number 2 is wrong.
Really? Individual entities can subscribe enough to cover 120% of their annual.
That's true.
We are doing, yeah, that's true.
Tell us, John.
Number 2 means that your subscription is sized to up to 120% of your last
year's.
Yes.
Right.
That sets the size, basically the capacity of the solar garden that's assigned to you. However much energy that thing produces, you still get the credit, number 3.
Yeah.
But not how much electricity you use in the future. It's not, that implies.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Past tense versus future, yeah. Right. The 120% limit is based on the past. I think it was 1 year, but you think it's 2?
It's a 2 year.
Is it 2 year? So 120%, and then it doesn't really matter, right? You get credit for whatever kilowatt hours are produced.
We see. This
I didn't actually do this
a lot,
slide.
and
I
it's
stole it.
really misleads people.
Yeah. I think this was certs maybe. I'll have to see if I can fix it.
Yeah, it did come from us.
Somebody knows? Thank you. Okay, well, thank you for the corrections. I have no problem with that.
The solar panels are indeed installed in sunny places.
Sunny places. Oh, thanks. Got that. So I mentioned already the behind the meter solar project at Blue Lake. We actually have more buffer land. We thought we might get as many as 4 megawatts, 4 community solar gardens there. After local permitting, that got reduced to 3. That will start under construction in a couple weeks. We're very close. It has the interconnection permit. The contract was a long time ago, and all the local permits are in place. So we're going to be building another 10,000 panels at that Blue Lake plant. It'll be quite a sight. I'm hoping if you're way on top of the top right at Valley Fair, you can see them. I think that would be cool. So the Empire plant, Empire's way in the south of the metro area. If you don't know, it's like Farmington, that area down there. We have a small wastewater plant, but a lot of land. We restored some wetland. This is on the Vermilion down there. And so we were actually going to do 9 community solar gardens there. Some of you know there was a big issue about that last summer. The PUC limited that to 5 for those that met grandparenting conditions and 1 megawatt after that. But we made it for 5, so we had to downside. That also is going to start in construction within the next few weeks. And then our Seneca plant, which is in Egan, we are actually, this one might be of interest. It's smaller. It's on a fixed space that used to be an ash landfill for the wastewater treatment plant there. Burned their biosolids and buried the ash landfill. So it's got a lot of restrictions. We monitor the water. It's got cover on it. You can't penetrate the cover. We had to get an extra permit from the PCA about modifying the water. And the vendor has to, I think they're using slabs or something instead of footings that go down so that they don't interfere with the landfill that's under there. And we expect that to start sometime this fall. Might be next year. But so in all these cases, here's another sort of secret. I don't know how much you know that a retail customer of Excel by law is limited to a maximum of 40%. But the council managed to get ourselves considered 2 different retail customers. Because Metro Transit has an independent history, they have separate funding, and the environmental service is the same thing. And after 6 months and lawyers, they decided, yeah, you're 2 separate retail customers. So when we put these on our plant, MCS will subscribe to 40% and Metro Transit will subscribe to 40%. So the council's getting 80. And then we offered the local governments served by these plants, which they snapped them up because they're all pretty good prices. They will all make money right from the get-go. Doug?
Jason, were you guys able to use local suppliers and products for those solar gardens? Or?
That's an interesting question, and I'm going to get to that in a while, but the answer is basically no, because we don't have the authority to prefer local. So, in addition, that stuff is all on our own land, right? And we didn't actually charge anything. The sort of value of the land is priced in. They were competitive. We got good prices. So there's no separate payment. They all have a lease to be on our land. But we have much more load. And not only that, the council, through its Thrive, its basic charge to help do things metropolitan-wide and help local governments in particular through comprehensive planning and technical assistance, we set up a collaborative with Metro Certs. Hennepin, Minneapolis, Ramsey were also part of the steering committee. We worked real hard together, and we offered any local government that wanted to come into this collaborative, and we would together put out an RFP. I'm not aware that anybody else has done that anywhere else in the country, and I've been called by places from all over the country wanting to know what the challenges and things were, and there were a lot. But in the end, we had 31 participating governments. Remember, I come for 2. 31 governments. They sent letters of intent that if the terms were good and the price were good, they wanted to. And so we were using this to try and attract bigger vendors and get a little more leverage. Actually, the estimated demand, everything had to be right? Because you have to be in the right county in order to be able to subscribe. But I think this actually got some attention by the PUC last summer when they were having that co-location. It was like, what? You have 185 megawatts? That's like utility scale. Uh-oh, sorry.
Yes. What was 31 of the lottery?
This was the lottery process.
They ended up at 31? Or?
No, 31 governments said they wanted to play, right? And what happened, what we said was, and in the letter of intent, they all agreed to our process that was laid out and administered by the Metro Certs, the Clean Energy Resource Team, because we were a big player. We didn't want to be doing the lottery ourselves. But so we didn't expect to get enough proposed good supply to meet this demand. So we set up a lottery system. We called it the lottery, but it's actually a lot of lotteries, because the vendors proposed gardens all over the metro area and the border counties. And so the first thing that Metro Certs had to do was look at, of all this demand, which parts are eligible that were expressed in the letters of intent. So that's a subset of the whole part. And then they did a random assignment. So if the Metropolitan Council got picked or MCS got picked, then we can't be picked again, right? Because you need 5. The intent was to try to get 5 governments, each at 20%, to fill out the whole subscription amount. Governments are actually pretty good subscribers, right? Because we're here forever, probably. We have AAA, a strong AAA bond credit, so these vendors all need to raise the money from big banker partners. So, and they only have 5, and they don't have to do any marketing. So we thought that would be really appealing. We spent months actually drafting a subscription agreement of our own, a standard that we wanted them to use. We did get 5 vendors proposed. They all rejected our subscription agreement and proposed, because they have this standard that they were offering to other people, proposed we use theirs, and we rejected all of theirs. Frankly, some of them had really no idea how to deal with government. The Data Practices Act. Oh, this offer is trade secret. No, it's not. Not if you send it to us. We get to decide, and frankly, it's not. So there were a lot of issues like that. It has to be auditable. I mean, we're a government. It's your money, right? So there are a lot of rules like that took us like 6 months. And frankly, a lot of our governments got kind of impatient because the Data Practices Act, during negotiations, we can't tell you anything. We could put people at a competitive advantage, and it took a long time. Eventually, all 5 of them did get qualified, and the process then said, so this lottery's done, and they're assigned to the governments, and then the governments get to look at the terms of the agreement, and the price and decide whether they're in or out. They were not supposed to negotiate. Several of them asked, and I said, well, you can do that separately if you have the authority to do that, but don't count that as part of my procurement, because we're following the law that we have to follow, and you can't, you agreed to this process, so to be part of this procurement, you get to say yes or no. And there were a fair number of no's on this, and then there was actually a second round of the lottery to try to fill in those holes. There was assigned again to a second set of governments, and some of them said no, and then the vendors were free to try and do what they could with other potential subscribers.
Why did you have a lottery when you oversubscribed?
We had 185 megawatts of demand for these governments, and we got, I don't know, 60 proposed, and it wasn't all good in various stages. There was also, the governments ranked them, as we do, and we have an evaluation panel, and so, the lottery was also assigning those that got picked early, got what we thought was better proposals assigned to them, that kind of thing. We have a lot of rules. Yeah.
Jason, you say the transit, Metro Transit is 4 megawatts of capacity.
This is the demand that they expressed, that they would want to participate in this.
Do you know what portion of their overall demand for Metro Transit?
I think they were 50 or even more than that. I can tell you, because I made a recommendation for MCS, that we were willing actually to do a third of our load, which is a big load. And the reason why wouldn't you do more? 25-year agreement. What's going to happen 10 or 15 years from now? I don't know if there's better deals. I mean, we want to help drive solar and get it going now, but not get so much committed that, people be swearing at me 15 years from now when they could have got a better deal.
Jason just had, the 31, have those been decided now to be picked?
So again, the 31 were the governments that wanted to play. They weren't picked,
Yeah.
right? They volunteered to do this. A lot of governments didn't want to.
Yeah.
Some governments, and I had the Star Tribune call me and said, well, the vendor put this offer in front of them and they just signed it. Don't they have to have a process? I am not making a legal opinion for you with that. You call their attorney and talk to him about that. I think they probably should have, but I don't, that's not my call. Governments were doing lots of things about this. The smaller ones maybe signed stuff they shouldn't have signed. But we went through, and this is what a lot of the governments that worked with us were relying on. We went through a very careful, we have conservative lawyers and procurement people, and it's, very intricate, detailed, sometimes painful process for everybody. But we're covered because it's your money, right? So the rules are like this.
Have you finalized governments now and happened?
Yeah, I can tell you somewhere here I have, MCS has actually signed a contract with all 5 of them. Although one of them we didn't like much, so we only signed one. And I will not name them, but 5 of the 31 declined all the offers. So they subscribed to 0, even though the price wasn't good. Part of this, I think people expected better prices, and there was a fair amount of chaos last summer because of the PUC decision that was limiting the co-location, and the vendors were trying to, reallocate their current subscriptions, and that was a problem. And the Star Tribune also kept trying to get me to say, "Did that hurt you?" And I said, we're doing a competitive process. This is a new reality. This is the market, as far as I can tell. We asked them for best and final offers. We negotiated the terms. I mean, we went through the process as best we can. But they weren't as lucrative as months before when people were signing up for community solar gardens that were 5, 10. I heard that one vendor was planning on 50 in one location. So it's huge economy of scale, right? Local permitting, the mobilization, all that kind of stuff. But they weren't allowed to finish that either. So they didn't actually get to do that. Anyways, 5 declined all offers. 20 of the governments signed up for some amount, about 28 megawatts. According to this, 4 are still evaluating, another 3 megawatts, and 2 we don't know. Oh, this is what my staff wrote. So there's another 4 or 5 megawatts. We haven't heard. Metro Certs is kind of doing the administration. Does everybody know what Metro Certs is?
Okay. Have they been built yet?
There were some of them, Geronimo in particular, that had gardens that were in progress that may have been built, we're not paying anything yet. So they're not done, but that we're farther along. Some of these were fairly speculative. We'll put one in Sherburne County there, and we'll give you this price. Really? What's it going to, you know? So, I mean, that was part of what the governments had to do to evaluate whether they wanted it. You probably know that investment tax credit's a big deal for the finance and making that work, and that we thought at the time we were doing this that the investment tax credit was going to drop from 30 to 10 at the end of 2016. And then surprisingly, Congress did something good at the end of last year and extended that for a few more years. So some of these will be built in 2017, clearly, but I expect some of them will get done.
None are turned on yet.
There's almost none of all of these solar gardens, never mind our stuff. You know,
There's only a few.
a couple of really small ones.
Any of them are yours.
But there are, I think I've heard something like 400 megawatts that have been approved by Excel now. Something like that.
Yeah, that's different. I heard that.
There's like 1,000 megawatts that was applied that has fallen away for one reason or another, but there's a lot that have been approved, and there's still a lot in process.
From Excel yesterday, but I'm not sure they were all community solar gardens, because there's like a Aurora project that's 100 megawatts, which is great.
I think there are 400 megawatts of community solar plus those others.
Okay.
And we're not counting like the behind the meter stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot. You're going to see an explosion of solar this year and next year in particular.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. So, and that leads me to this. Community solar garden programs by utility. This is CERTs. So you can go see there's numbers and where they're at and that kind of thing if you're interested in that. This map shows solar gardens by county in Excel territory. So there's a lot of data. Let's see, whose is this? This is also CERTs, I guess. So this is the University of Minnesota. If you don't know, it might be a good talk sometime. They have a pretty good tool now about the solar irradiation that's available. The yellow here is the greatest solar, but really pretty much most of the states, okay, better than the East. That's for sure anyways. If you click on a spot in this map, it'll show you the amount of actual sun per month. I don't know, maybe John, you know, are these in NREL SAM data? I don't know how they got this. Or
It's LiDAR data.
is it?
Yeah, so they're doing it from a satellite, so they're not precise, but they're in the ballpark.
Okay. And it might be good to check with NREL's database
Yeah, if
too.
you want to know precisely, you got to go there to measure it.
Okay. They also have references for how you can learn more and options and policies and that sort of thing on the university's website.
It's a pretty cool site, though.
Thank you. Who's that?
Do you want to add anything more about it?
Well, you just basically it's reading how much shading you have in the area, combined with the radiance that you get in the area, and it gives you a number.
Yeah.
So you can just click on, it's using a Google map, you can click on it, and you get a nice little report and stuff to go away with, and
Cool.
it's pretty easy to use.
Yeah.
So this is a PV power map, looking at solar resources all over. So you can see Minnesota's not quite as good as the Southwest. I would tell you, though, that there's one thing about the Southwest that's nice. You know that investment tax credit extension we just talked about? There's some big businesses here, solar businesses now, and they're starting to get some legislative influence that probably made a difference in getting that investment tax credit extended last year. But there's a lot of solar in New Jersey, and we're better than them. So there's lots of maps, lots of resources.
They pay more for the electricity, that's why.
Yeah. If you're interested, I could talk some about sort of issues and perspective and concerns from what we've done so far. How are we doing for time? Where's that? Hold on, I'm supposed to be done in 15 minutes.
We got about 20 minutes.
Yeah. I think maybe I'll save some of this for in the hall if you want to know some more details. We had lots of issues with contract terms, both behind the meter and community solar gardens. It was pretty ugly. We have, this was the issue, somebody asked me about local content before. One of the hard things to deal with right away for us in a procurement is what kind of requirements are we going to make for minority woman-owned business goals for subcontractors? And frankly, we didn't know how to do that. It's not our money, right? It's the vendor's money or the bankers they borrow it from. And in some cases, it's not our land. We didn't have goals. I talked to our diversity people. They said, well, let's do a meet and greet, meet minority subcontractors. So we did that. And then we issued the RFPs, and we're moving on all these things at once, and we got a lot of flack. And the council cares a lot about trying to encourage and use minority and women-owned businesses. And so we've actually changed our policy now some, and if and when we do more, there'll be more requirements. But it's kind of hard when it's not really our money. But we have, the governor's office called, the Human Rights Commissioner, Senator Marty, I mean, on and on down the lists about what we could do. So everybody's working hard to try and find ways to work with disadvantaged businesses. Prevailing wages is another issue. Usually that's determined for us by, if we get state or federal money, it comes with those strings attached. Sometimes we get both, and you have to apply both, which is hard. But this is not our money. Do we prevailing wages? A lot of people feel pretty strongly about that. I had somebody tell me those nomadic Southerners are going to come in here and snap up all this work and then go back and leave us. Because we don't pay them enough? I don't know. Anyways, so prevailing wages, got to decide. The question of local content, we did ask our legal staff. We need a policy. It's not clear the council has the authority to do that. I know we don't. When we have federal money, they won't let us do that. But they wouldn't let us do it on this because we didn't have a policy. So we didn't actually get to the question of whether we could have a policy. But without a policy, you can't make that requirement. So we did not require local content.
But you can have made in U.S. products. You can require that.
If the federal government says we can, when they give us money.
Yeah. Usually, I mean,
sometimes we have, like
American Act.
Yeah, well, that had a requirement in it that we did that actually. But in government, it's always a challenge to figure out what our authority is, even for an activity or any sort of procurement rules that take it away from just a straight competition. What I want to say about sole source is we generally don't. You have to have a pretty darn good reason why you can't compete this and why it's a competitive rate. There is a possibility, particularly with some of the contractors we've dealt with, if it's a limited time, where we can do that, but we generally don't. It's your money, we're going to do competition. That takes time. Some of you know the community solar garden thing was just a chaos. There was lots of reasons to rush. It was the investment tax credit. It was your position in the queue, and whether Excel would get to look at it in time at all, and whether they were going to add extra costs on, right? Because you were the second one on that substation or line, and so upgrades, whoever comes in last has to pay those costs. There was a whole number of reasons to rush, and we largely can't. And when we have a process, I mean, I made some people angry with me, but that's the way it goes. Lots of technical issues. I've talked about those some. Particularly behind the meter, we have our own specs sometimes, and so we really need to get those perhaps re-examined. But there's lots of issues that we need technical discussions on if we might own it. And for instance, behind the meter, we all have purchase options after 5 years and 10 years and so forth. So our people care. You wouldn't necessarily think of this, but in a wastewater treatment plant, we like them to use copper because H2S gas can eat things up. Well, if you don't specify that, they won't. So anyways, stuff like that. There's a lot more we could talk about. Communications, a real challenge was to get people to understand RECs, the renewable energy credits, and I'm sure that many don't still. I have taken to saying we're advancing solar because we didn't keep any of the RECs, right? This is not additional. Excel can count this towards their goals. So we are not powered by solar energy. We are advancing solar. I gave you 10 reasons why that's a good thing. But we have to be careful about what you say so it's not double counting, even towards our own goals.
If you have some behind the meter.
And we sold the RECs on that too.
You did
It's worth some money. I mean, we're talking about, I'm not aware of anybody that's done a community solar garden and kept the REC. Some of you in here, do you know? Has anybody done that? Because it's worth $2. I mean, 2 cents per kilowatt hour. I mean, it's a big deal financially. It's like, what?
Yeah, in the short term, it wouldn't make sense. They expire in the short term too.
So that's an issue. Probably enough said about that. I wanted to quickly talk about other renewable energy because we have some. This is a picture of incinerator at the Metro plant, the big plant I showed you before. We have, since 2005, we've been using this. I'll just summarize some of this. It's 4.7 megawatt generation. It averages about 2 megawatt hours. So we make electricity, and that just directly offsets what we have to buy. We're still paying Excel $15 million, but we're doing what we can. This is sort of biogenic, right? It's a renewable resource because it's wastewater. I won't be more descriptive. Sometimes we use the steam actually for other plant purposes, mostly to heat buildings, but also in the odor control and so forth. And that the pressure has to be dropped. So we actually built a non-condensing turbine. It's about 808 kW, and we make electricity from that too before we use the steam for other purposes.
You're burning, it's a burning process though.
And it is the EPA's best management practice. They actually came and modeled the emissions from this and made them the standard. It made all of our wastewater peer agencies mad at us because then they had to comply, or in the future would have to comply with this. It is a better energy return than some of the other things we could do with this.
You probably don't have like nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, and mercury.
I can get you some technical people that can tell you the answer to that. I think there are NOx.
Oh, there are?
Yeah.
A little bit?
But if you go look at the Metro plant, you will never see anything coming out of there. It's on all the time. And actually, we're in the process of starting public engagement about expanding that. The sustainable incineration, we're sort of at capacity. So, I mean, this is a big deal for the metro area. We also do anaerobic digestion at 2 of our plants. This is the Blue Lake plant I mentioned previously with the solar plant. We have a public-private partnership with New England Fertilizer. This is the product that they make. They dry the sludge, and then they screen it, and they sell it to farmers. And so reduce the cost we pay. But first we do anaerobic digestion here, and we're actually using the gas now. When we planned this project, we thought it was $1 million savings of natural gas, but then the natural gas price dropped, so it's only really about half that. But still, it's a pretty good thing, and it's...
How long is the plant good for?
How long is...
How long do you expect the life of the plant to be?
Well, we build things municipal grade. They last a long time. I don't know, 20 years. I mean, some of the electrical stuff will have to be removed before that. We have an extensive asset management program that takes all the assets apart and looks at condition and inspection and assessments and, tries to keep stuff, because we think we're in this forever. So, the Metro plant was built in the 30s, and it's slowly but surely been entirely rebuilt.
So that half million is probably going to be an increasing number for you.
Well, you tell me what's going to happen with natural gas prices when it's fracking. We really shouldn't talk about all of our wonderful renewable energy without talking some about energy conservation. We did some cool projects. That Metro plant has 5 miles of tunnels under it with lights on all the time. And we replaced them all. I can tell you more about that. But about 200,000 a year savings just from that, and the lights better. Most of our energy actually, though, ignoring this, goes to aerate the wastewater tanks. Do I have a picture of that? Yeah. This is called a diffuser. So we have giant blowers that push huge amounts of air into the wastewater tanks to make the bugs happy because they need air. This is aerobic, not anaerobic. And this is a diffuser, if you'd like to see it. It looks like a plate. It's heavy. The air has to go through that. It takes a lot of energy, and that is, in our case, 40 to 50% of our energy. And we've done a huge amount of projects, lowering the set points, which means we can do less air when we can, different tanks and different seasons, cleaning these more carefully, lowering the header pressure. I mean, we actually got some conservation money from Excel because we did computer programming that got to the set points faster. I was, really? That counts? Yeah, okay. Because that was a significant amount of energy. So lots of motors and variable speed. This is what a wastewater tank looks like empty. Those are all diffusers. We have thousands and thousands of them.
is why we pay Excel $15 million a year.
I thought this would be fun to let you know too. Light rail is electric, and we're trying to get more and more clean, you know, about that. But we're also looking at electric vehicles, including electric buses. We've made 2 grant applications. We lost the first one. There's one that we're going to hear about at any point. It's 10 or 12 buses. It would be there's a route they've picked, and we're working with Excel, who would pay for the charging infrastructure, but it's up to like Brooklyn Park and back. So we want to learn. The staff there said, hey, if this works, we could potentially go to 80% electric with the current layout of things. Oh my God, what a bunch of co-benefits for the region. Cleaner, quieter, less odor. And it's sort of a grand bargain for Excel, right? Because Excel's got a problem now. We have done a lot of conservation, distributed energy, and so their load growth has gone away, which means they pass that price on to us as their costs go up, so their rates go up, so more and more people want to self-generate, so more and more people get distributed energy, or big industries do self-generation gas turbines, so the price goes up. So, but this is new load. They can't go anywhere. This is a good thing for Excel. And some people are calling it the grand bargain, that they get cleaner and cleaner, and they get to eventually do transportation and heat too. So Great Plains, if you know them, Rolf Nordstrom likes to talk about that.
They're best for down to 15% coal now, from over 50.
So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll get some electric bus demonstrations. Duluth has actually got some money, and we're working hard to do that. So I might maybe need to skip some of this stuff. We've got a lot of awards for our energy conservation. We are certainly considering more community solar gardens. We didn't get as many as we wanted. Kind of trying to let the dust settle here, see how things go, because we had this flurry of stuff last year. But Minneapolis has an RFP. They're trying to accomplish some social goals as well, and we've said we would potentially participate with them instead of them participating with us. I think it's small. Transit did we had 6 rooftop solar in one of our RFPs earlier, and the vendor that was picked after much negotiations walked away from the deal, which was really upsetting. So they'll be putting that back out again this summer. It's a rooftop behind the meter on 6 different transit sites, and really pretty cool. They're looking at regenerative braking on the light rail. Right now, if one train is braking, another one's taking off on the other side, that electricity can get used, but if there's not one that happens at the same time, it's wasted. So we have proposals now. I don't know how hard that is, but it'll be pretty cool, and hopefully they can have a conservation goal too. Solar rate reform is an issue. Some of you may know. I had something to do with this years ago, before there was value of solar and net metering. We looked at trying to get a capacity credit, because we have to pay standby on behind the meter, and solar is pretty much available when the Excel system's at a peak. They were giving wind a little credit, and they weren't giving solar anything. And so we started a little group. Some of the governments did. Eventually we got some vendors to join us. We got a $5.15 per kilowatt credit after 2 or 3 years of work. And actually now Excel is trying to change that. So people are meeting again. It's an open docket if you're interested in this. It's an important piece of the financial for...
Do you know the docket behind the meter?
I don't, but if you want to send me an email, I can.
Yeah,
you can find it. So stay tuned for more of that. We do a lot to support local governments. Most of what I've told you about is leading by example in our own operations. But you know, the original Met Council was about local governments. As I mentioned on that introductory slide, we try to help them, we try to coordinate. And so there's a lot of technical assistance. The council is working on a climate vulnerability assessment. We have a lot of stormwater stuff I can talk about. We're hoping to have an urban forestry program. Again, the heat island effect, climate change, the air quality issues, all will be improved by urban forestry. And we have resources. We work hard with lots of other state groups. If you've, today, I met with 3 state groups. EQB in the morning, we were talking about CZO. And if you don't know, next week there's a stakeholder meeting that Environmental Initiative is organizing. I think it's at the Science Museum to talk about some draft policies. Among them are increasing the renewable energy standard and increasing the energy efficiency. Those are actually the most likely. Those are big deals. The rest of them are less so. But we work with Clean Air Minnesota, Climate Registry, Excel. We have a industrial MOU with them so we get enhanced rebates actually for our conservation. They're not quite as helpful on renewable energy, but on conservation, it's a good partnership. You maybe have heard last month there was announced the Minnesota Sustainable Growth Coalition. These are big businesses headquartered in the Twin Cities that want to enhance what they do for sustainability. The energy group has already started. We met this week too. They also want to get recognized. So this is General Mills and Cargill and Target and Medtronic and all those kinds of people. There's like 30 of them. And I believe we really need the private sector to get engaged in this because this problem is too big for us alone. And we're invited, even though it's mostly private sector, just because our enterprises are more like a business and we can help them with the water issues as well. Metro Energy Coalition used to be Energy Policy Coalitions, counties, MAC, and the council. We do lots of stuff with them. Great Plains, you know of E21. I've been involved in that process, this business model conversation, and I talked about the death spiral a minute ago. That's been ongoing for 2 years, hopefully wrapping up next month. State interagency teams, as I mentioned this morning, we talked about CZO with EQB. I went to AG. The American Biogas Coalition was here. There is a federal bill that would extend investment tax credit to them, and they are looking for people to help. And then, let's see, I went to Department of Commerce, Division of Energy Resources, had people in, national people too, the Sustainable Business Council or something, talking about energy. There's a Minnesota version of that, which is a brand new group as well, a nonprofit. So there's just no end to this, how much you can do. I wanted to say, I think I'm out of time. I think it's important to talk a little bit from government perspective about policy. So in the private sector, they're looking at, they're trying to get payback in 2, 3, 4, sometimes if they're generous, 5 years. But in the government sector, we're in it for the long run. So our hurdle is actually that we can get an expected present value benefit over the life cycle. For solar, we have a really long, and we're directed to go after those kinds of projects. The societal environmental benefits are for free. They're gravy, but it allows me to tell the wastewater ratepayers, you're not paying for this fixing climate change on your own, you're actually making money. So we have a pretty progressive policy, I think. And that doesn't mean that we don't sometimes look at triple bottom line too, but when it's your money, when the wastewater rate base doesn't want to pay to solve all the world's environmental problems all by themselves, so that would be a public conversation about doing other things.
So are you talking about that net present value of the life cycle cost, or are you talking about levelized cost of energy then?
Discounted cash flow, whatever they are. They're not necessarily levelized.
Okay.
Over the life cycle.
So you just
Discounted, I use a 4% discount rate, bring it back to today's dollars. Is it greater than 0? We should do that.
Okay.
Although it's expected, so sometimes you have to do a bunch of cases.
Since you throw numbers like that, what number do you use for the cost of energy increase?
We do have some guidance on that. I think it's 3.5, 3 or 3.5. We looked, because of the community solar garden credits, you know, that varies with the applicable retail rate. We looked at the history of that, and it's about 3%. I have some numbers on that.
Depends on how many years you look at.
Yeah.
If it's 20 years, it's less. If it's 10 years,
Well,
Yeah, we looked at it 20. And it's conservative. But
that
we still,
versus solar.
I'm really out of time. Doug's getting anxious with me, but I could go on and on. But, so there's lots of help. This is the county, the MEC has a toolkit, solar stuff. Tell you more later. The council has a local government planning handbook. We have lots of stuff that we don't mandate for cities, but we try to help them. If you want to do better, a comprehensive plan, you should think about your energy footprint and about your climate goals and stuff. We try to help them. Certs, we saw some cert stuff. Apparently some of it was wrong. So what's this? Oh, we have fact sheets on the council's own website. And I'll stop. Doug.